36 members of our task
Tenemos 36 miembros.
government officials, law
No.
enforcement,
Trabajando con la oficina del Ejecutivo del Condado de Suffolk, el grupo de trabajo recién creado solicitaron aportes de individuos y organizaciones en todo el condado, contribuyendo y al desarrollo de un plan que sea presentada primero a la legislatura del Condado de Suffolk y luego al Estado de Nueva York el 1 de abril 2020.
Determining the role of police. Looking at staffing, budgeting, and equipping our police department. Employing smart and effective policing standards and strategies. Looking at procedural justice and community policing. Looking at
fuerzas del orden, sindicatos policiales, líderes religiosos y líderes comunitarios. Nosotros vamos a ver cómo es la interacción con la comunidad, viendo cómo el uso de la fuerza, viendo la tecnología y los números.
We are looking at recruiting and supporting excellent personnel, recruiting a diverse workforce, training and continuing education, and supporting officer wellness and well-being. Our task force activities to date include, on 9/21 was our first task force introductory meeting. We had the opportunity to introduce task force members to each other and explain the creation and format for the task force meetings and public input and comment forums. On October 9th, our second task force meeting, the topics we discussed were recruitment, applicant investigations, promotions, and internal affairs part 1, an overview of officer accountability. Our meeting on October 21st, task force meeting 3, was internal affairs part 2, which covered discipline policy and procedures, command discipline procedures, departmental charges and procedures, and disciplinary options. Our task force meeting 4 on October 27th covered internal affairs part 3, referrals, the Internal Affairs Bureau response team, external review of Suffolk County Police Department Internal Affairs Bureau, access to disciplinary records under 50A, and availability of internal affairs reports. In addition, we have created a task force website, which includes information on all of our task force members. It includes information on all of our public input listening sessions. It has information in reference to resources, data, statistics, and rules and policies and procedures of the Suffolk County Police Department in an effort to ensure that the public has access to information. So as we are having and engaging in these public listening and input sessions, that you have information that you can speak to. That resources tab is continually updated with additional resources that we will make available to the public. You know, our task force members have spent arduous and long hours thus far engaged in the work of police reform and reinvention. Some of the recommendations that we've received thus far are inclusive of streamlining and improving the process for complaints regarding officers and mistreatment, looking at additional oversight regarding internal affairs, considering additional formats for public listening sessions to ensure that all people feel comfortable sharing their issues, concerns, and recommendations for police reform and reinvention, and engaging in dialogue and looking at research regarding the use of the polygraph as part of the applicant investigations process for onboarding of Suffolk County police officers. And you, the public, is crucial and critical to this process that we're engaged in reference to police reform and reinvention. So we are so very thankful for all of you that have joined us today. At this time, before we introduce our task force members to you, I'd like to turn it over to my co-facilitator. I am Deputy County Executive Vanessa Baird Streeter. I am the facilitator for the Police Reform and Reinvention Task Force, and my co-facilitator, I believe is on the line, John Kamen, and I turn it over to him now for him to introduce himself. John?
Yes, hello everybody. I'm John Kamen, Deputy County Executive. as well, working with Vanessa and our team on behalf of the county executive and of course, the entire task force. This really is an opportunity for us to listen, to hear what people want to talk about, to share personal experiences. Please be aware, of course, that you can send us more information. 3 minutes is not a lot of time. So if you have additional information that you'd like to send us, as you know, we save some time every so often, please send it to us. Include any information that you want. We want to have your personal experiences, and we want to have your thoughts, ideas, concerns, observations as part of our deliberation as a committee. If anyone on the task force, if any of the members does have a question, a clarifying question, they may ask you a question, but for the most part, as we've indicated, we're really not going to be asking a lot of questions. We're here to listen, but if there's some concern or a question, someone from the task force is always free to jump in and just to get some clarification. So with that, looking forward to hearing what people have to say. There'll be other opportunities after this, several more meetings. Please stay with us and encourage other people that you know or yourself to come back and continue this dialogue with us. So thank you.
Thank you, John. At this time, I'd like to introduce to you and have her provide some words of welcome, our Police Commissioner, Ms. Geraldine Hart.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome. And thank you, Vanessa, and thank you, John. And thank you to the task force members who, as Vanessa detailed, we have met a number of times and have had some really, really good discussions on some really critical topics. And we look forward to that continuing. Really, I want to thank all of you, first and foremost, because you're taking time out of your day to be part of this, and it shows that you're committed to making this department better. And I want you to know that the leadership of this department is committed to making this department better and to listening to you, listening to all of your stories and your suggestions, your situations that you've had, positive or negative, and making sure that we're really just here to understand that, to take it to heart, and to come up with some solutions together. So this is a tremendous opportunity for us. This evening is a great opportunity. This entire task force concept is a tremendous opportunity to continue to move this department forward and make it the best that it could be, make it respectful and equitable and really just fair. We want to just make sure that we're fair and treating our residents that way and that they feel that way. So I'm joined tonight by our Deputy Police Commissioner, Risco Menchin-Lewis, and our Chief of Department, Stuart Cameron. And again, looking forward to hearing from you, and thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Deputy Police Commissioner, Risco Menchin-Lewis.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you all for coming to be on the call tonight. There's many of you, and that's an exciting thing to find so many people who are really dedicated to helping this reimagining of policing. It's a difficult time for us, but an exciting time. And I can say with complete confidence that the Suffolk County Police Department is ready, willing, and able to address the issues, are committed to change, and making this department a leader in the nation. So we thank you, and we look forward to listening.
Thank you, Deputy Police Commissioner. And as the Police Commissioner mentioned as well, we do have the Chief of Police on the phone, on the call as well, Chief Stu Cameron. Would you like to say a few words?
Certainly. Thank you, Vanessa. Good evening, everyone. I'm Stu Cameron. I'm the Chief of Department of the Suffolk County Police. I've been in that position for about 5 years. I'm a 35-year member of the Suffolk County Police Department. Para cualquier gente que habla español, me llamo Stuart Cameron y soy el jefe del Departamento de Policía del Condado de Suffolk. Estoy muy contento de estar aquí con ustedes. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. At this time, as we are talking about our task force are critical members of our community and of our government who are tasked with the work of police reform and reinvention. So it's important for each of you to be familiar with our task force members. And at this time, I'm just going to say their first name and then they will introduce themselves. So you've met myself. I'm a co-facilitator along with John Kamen. The Police Commissioner, Geraldine Hart, is a member of the task force. Deputy Police Commissioner Risco Menchin-Lewis is a member of the task force. And at this time, I'm going to turn it over to Legislator Jason to introduce himself.
Good evening, everyone. My name is my name is Jason Richburg. I'm the legislator for the 15th Legislative District, which includes Wyandanch, Wheatley Heights, East Farmingdale, North Lindenhurst, North Amityville, Copeg, and Amity Harbor. I want to thank you all for being here, and I'm here to listen and learn from your experiences, and I want to help move us forward. So thank you very much, and thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you, Jason. Ms. Rita?
Hi, good evening, everyone. I am Rita Fernandez. My pronouns are she, her, and ella. I serve as the Chief Diversity and Inclusion Officer for Suffolk County Government, and just like Legislator Richburg, here to listen and learn. Thank you.
Thank you, Rita. Pilar?
Yes, good evening, everyone. My name is Pilar Moya Mancera. I am the Executive Director of Housing Help and a member of the Suffolk County Hispanic Advisory Board. Mi nombre es Pilar Moya Mancera, soy la directora ejecutiva de Housing Help. Pueden comunicarse conmigo si tienen alguna pregunta. Thank you.
Thank you, Pilar. Roger?
Thank you. I'm Roger Clayman. I'm representing the Long Island Federation of Labor, the organization of local unions on Long Island.
Thank you. Task Force Member Kathleen.
Good evening. My name is Kathleen King. I am the chairperson of the Suffolk County Native American Advisory Board, representing the 4 indigenous tribal nations in Suffolk County, the Sitalakot, Unkachuk, Shinnecock, and Montauk tribes.
Thank you, Kathleen. Linda?
Hi, good evening. My name is Linda Perdomo Ayala. I'm the chair of the Suffolk County Youth Human Rights. Mi nombre es Linda Perdomo Ayala y soy la gerenta del Departamento de Recursos Humanos en el Condado de Suffolk.
Thank you, Linda. Girish? We'll come back to Girish. Jennifer?
Hello, everyone. My name is Jennifer Levesque. I am representing Next Generation Long Island. I have to say Huntington is my hometown, and so I'm happy to be a part of this task force, and I'm really looking forward to hearing from all of you tonight.
Thank you. Dan?
Good evening. My name is Danny Lloyd, founder and president of Minority Millennials, an organization that works to represent minorities and millennials in any policies that impact our future. And I'm really enjoying this conversation tonight.
Thank you, Dan. Sharon?
Hello, my name is Sharon Weber. I am an attorney. I've been a criminal defense attorney for 28 years, and I'm a member of Amistad, the Black Bar Association on Long Island, and I look forward to hearing your stories and I'm very happy to be a part of this task force.
Thank you, Sharon. We do have a member of our DA's office that is on our virtual forum tonight as well. That's Leslie Anderson. She's representing District Attorney Tim Sini. And I will go back to Girish Patel. Girish, are you on to introduce yourself? Okay, so Girish may join us later. But that was an introduction of our task force members. As I indicated, we have 36 members of our task force, and today we have 14 of our task force members on this particular public listening session for 2nd Precinct, the town of Huntington. As Christian indicated earlier in the beginning and welcome remarks and housekeeping, is that we're going to now engage in our public input listening session portion of our virtual forum. You have 3 minutes to speak. We will go by speaker order number. If we happen to pass you and you do not speak at that time, we will revisit the list once we go through the entire list in our speaking order. You have 3 minutes, and once again, as John Kamen indicated, if there is a clarifying question that one of the task force members want to ask you, they will allow you to complete your 3 minutes, and then they will ask the question. In addition to the task force members, we have some hardworking individuals that are part of the county executive staff that are staff to the task force. And it's important that you know those individuals as well, because they are the ones that are communicating with the public, in addition to myself as a facilitator and John Kamen. So we also have Olga El Sahami. She is a task force staffer, as well as Felix Adeyeye. We have Christian Macario, and we have Portia Ingram. All staffers are on the call this evening, and they're also going to be monitoring the chat as well. So at this time, we're going to turn it over to our public portion of our meeting, our virtual meeting. And we're going to turn it over now to Speaker 1. Speaker 1, are you on the call? If you are, please unmute yourself.
Yes, I'm on the call. First of all, I want to thank you for the opportunity to have a voice in Suffolk County's response to Governor Cuomo's mandated executive order on New York State police reform and reinvention collaboration. I am a member of Long Island United to Transform Policing and Community Safety. I was in the impression it was questions. It said submit your questions, so I kind of did this in question form, but my question is this. I'd like to know from the task force what specific plans are being made to take the police out of the business of public health crises, specifically in the area of mental health and substance abuse, homelessness. I ask this in light of the numerous programs around the country in cities like Oregon, Eugene, Oregon, or Springfield, Oregon, Denver, Oakland, Portland, San Francisco, San Antonio, that are successfully incorporating community response to these crises instead of police or law enforcement response. Some of them are pilot programs, some of them are new, some of them, the CAHOOTS program that most of us know about is Eugene and Springfield, Oregon is 30 years old. So they're not all popping up new programs. They have a track record, and a particularly successful track record at that. Research has shown that a healthcare response by mental health care workers is not only more successful for the recipients, but also it's tremendously cost saving for the taxpayers. So we at Long Island United have been hard at work getting tons of research about these other programs, and we'd be more than willing to share it with you if there's any interest. But I understand you're not answering questions, but I hope you have plans in the works. Thank you.
But we can tell you that there's definitely interest. I mean, just to the extent that this is, it's an important part of the discussion, and so would love to see whatever information, and if you are interested in setting up a meeting and reaching out to Vanessa or myself, would start that conversation in more depth with you and bring the information to the larger board as well.
That's great. Thank you.
Thank
We'll
you.
do that.
And please feel free, if you'd like to submit your information tonight, if you'd like, public.input@suffolkcountyny.gov. And then we'll have the opportunity to review, and we will definitely reach out to you. So thank you very much for your comment. Much appreciated. Speaker 2.
Hi.
Speaker 2 has company as well.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm trying
That's
to.
okay. We all have busy lives.
Yeah, she just woke up. No. Thank you for letting me speak tonight. My name is Jennifer Capitordo, and I'm a resident of Comac. I'd like to start off with some suggestions of what I believe in Suffolk County needs to move forward to work with advocate groups like Long Island United to transform policing and community safety, which I'm also a member of. We need data and transparency, specifically police footprint calls and officer-initiated contacts broken down by race and ethnicity, and they need to be available to the public. We need to shift 911 calls that deal with mental illness, drug abuse, and homelessness to alternative first responder programs so the police department can focus on crime prevention. Perhaps also a CCRB whose credentials are close to the pain of marginalized communities, but also I need to remind the Suffolk County Police Department, specifically the 2nd and 4th precincts, that Martin Luther King once said, "A riot is the language of the unheard." And with that in mind, isn't it the responsibility of the police to ensure that peaceful protests can proceed here in Suffolk County as a means to safeguard public safety? The violent arrest of peaceful protests on 2 weeks ago in Comac was, in my opinion, an egregious abuse of power and an embarrassment to me as a tax-paying resident of Comac. For a turnout of less than 50 people to have a 20-plus car police presence from 2 separate precincts was a waste of taxpayers' money, and I interpret it as a means of intimidation, especially considering just days before in Brentwood, there was barely an officer present. This represents a clear difference in policing. After arrests were made that resulted in multiple injuries, all of the officers left, and we were left to cross the busy 2-lane street alone in the dark to get to the sidewalk in case another unmarked car with police officers pulled up and started arresting people again. Where was the regard for public safety then? Perhaps we should have asked the guys in the pickup trucks with the Trump flags to assist us across the street. But they showed up conveniently after the police left, and they didn't seem so friendly as usual. So moving forward, I'm wondering how Suffolk County Police Department intend on building trust in communities when the response to peaceful protests against police brutality was the suppression of them. Thank you.
Thank you. I have a clarifying question. You mentioned something that took place in Brentwood the week before. What was the event that took place in Brentwood the week before?
Actually, it was 3 days before. It was a protest in front of the Brentwood School District in regards to asking for a private investigation of a student's suicide because she was bullied by teachers and staff.
Thank you for clarifying that. I appreciate it.
You're welcome.
And thank you for sharing as well.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is speaker number 3.
Hi. First of all, thank you for giving me the opportunity to put some input into this. My name is Jayette Lansbury. I'm the Criminal Justice Chair for the National Alliance of Mental Illness of New York State, and also the president of NAMI Huntington, Suffolk County. The reason I wanted to give input after having a family member that had a bad response with the 2nd precinct about 15 years ago, and families that are afraid to call when their loved one is in a crisis because they're afraid of the outcome. There are so many programs popping up around the country, and I'm sure we could use them in Suffolk County as well. There's the Stepping Up Initiative, which is a thing with the Bureau of Justice and NAMI that helps officers to learn when they come in contact with people with mental illness and on the autism spectrum. There's also the crisis intervention training, which I know Suffolk County is doing. And I'm so thankful for that because that's going to save lives, but not only the lives of the people they go to arrest, but it's also about safety. Also, mental health first aid is the biggie. If we could get some more officers trained in the mental health first aid, it's going to help when they come in contact with these people, as well as for their own emotional support, which I know after coming from a family of law enforcement is so important. You know, we can't only think about the people that we're going for, we also have to think about the officers' well-being and their families as well. So that was the major things. I don't want a family to have to be scared when they do have to call somebody for a mental health crisis, afraid that they're going to call and that their loved loved one's going to be mishandled or mistreated or dragged off to jail. There is a lot more we can do about that to prevent that. The Cahoots, which is in Eugene, Oregon, is a fabulous program. You know, you guys got to check it out. It's a mental health crisis team, but the police are called if there's a threat of violence, a threat of a weapon, or anybody's safety or suicide is threatening suicide. But it's a fabulous, and the same thing with CRT down in Atlanta, Georgia, which is crisis response teams. And then Dade County, Florida has another one that works well called the Justice Diversion Project. Because even CIT offices want more respite units to take people to instead of taking them to jail or the hospital, because we know the jail is no place for a person with any disability and mental illness. And we know that most of these things that do happen between the police and people getting hurt, about 3/4 of them suffer from a serious mental illness that's untreated. And it's really, you know, the uniforms, if you're in a psychotic episode, the uniform gives the appearance of a person like a monster or something. My family member said that when the police came and he was in the psychotic, he thought they were monsters coming to kill him. So, you know, there's lots of things we can work out, and there's lots of families that have been trained in CIT that could help, you know, to let people know what mental illness is like, you know, and how to treat. Families are tired too of being told, you know, we're the officers, get the F out of the way and let us handle it. You know, so that's not good for anybody. And I tell the families now to please let the officers know it's a mental health crisis, but the dispatchers need to be trained too, so they know who to put the calls out to. So I'm sure we can all work together. I'm thankful for the CIT training that's going on in Suffolk. And if there's any way that NAMI can be of helpful, that's what we're here for. And I appreciate the idea to be able to speak tonight. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I have one clarifying question. The first program that you mentioned that's in Eugene, Oregon, you said it's called Cahoots?
Yeah, Cahoots, C-A, capital A, capital H, capital O, capital T-S, and capital S.
Thank you so much. Thank you for sharing. Appreciate you. Now we will go on to speaker 4. Speaker 4, please unmute yourself. Speaker 4, the last name is Weaving. Okay, we will go back to speaker 4. Speaker 5, please unmute yourself.
Speaker 4 unavailable for comment tonight. And I apologize, but I am following closely. My big concern is police in our schools. I work in Brentwood High School and I've seen some sad things. Thank you.
Thank you, Speaker 4. And feel free, Speaker 4, if you have the opportunity and you cannot speak tonight, we have 5 additional listening sessions that will, 4 after tonight that will take place. So please feel free to sign on to any of those others to be able to share your comments and concerns. So thank you.
Thank you.
Speaker 5. Speaker 5, last name Marchetta. Okay. We will go on to speaker 6.
Hi, I want to pass my spot over to Terrell Dozier. and I'd be happy to do that and reserve my comments for the very end, if that's okay.
So Speaker 6, you have the opportunity to speak, and we have been communicating with Charles so we can have them speak as well.
I'd prefer to be at the end. I'm really interested in listening, and I may or may not comment, but I prefer to be at the end.
Thank you very much.
Thank
you. Terrell Dozier.
Thank you. I appreciate Speaker 6 allowing me to give me that position. Thank you so much. I did prepare a few remarks, but I will try to make them brief. As mentioned, my name is Terrell Dozier, and I am a member of the coalition LI United to Transform Policing and Community Safety. I see a few of those faces here today. And I'm speaking as a community member to discuss structural changes in the way in which Suffolk County is addressing bias, discrimination, and inequitable outcomes in traffic enforcement. The data is pretty clear. We've seen it from the Finn report. We've seen it from the Newsday analysis. In Suffolk County, Black drivers are 4 times more often pulled over than white drivers, and Hispanic drivers are 2 times more often pulled over. Black drivers are 3 times more often searched than white drivers. Hispanic drivers are 1.7 times more often searched. And yet police find contraband less frequently when searching Black and Hispanic drivers than when they do white drivers. Unfortunately, this form of policing, as we know, should have gone away with Jim Crow. We cannot continue to have 2 different systems of traffic safety in Suffolk County, one for Black and Hispanic community members and the other for white community members. And I don't think any reasonable person would suspect that one ethnic group engages in traffic violations more than another ethnic group. And we know that some folks say that training is the answer, but we know that training is actually not the answer. The PBA has recently endorsed Donald Trump, and Donald Trump is trying to get rid of implicit bias federally. So we can't even imagine that the PBA believes that training is the answer. The answer has to be structural change. The coalition has come up with a few simple solutions that I would like to articulate. One, we believe that Suffolk County needs to invest in an unarmed civilian force unconnected to the police department to enforce basic traffic laws, and forbid the police officers from enforcing these traffic laws, particularly as it relates to pretextual stops. We know having an armed force can escalate the situation. If you get pulled over for speeding, you should get a speeding ticket and go on your way. 2, Suffolk County should invest in unmanned traffic options in order to limit the bias that we've seen in the data, as well as limit traffic violations altogether. This might mean placing automatic options such as speeding cameras, and of course engaging in a racial equity analysis to make certain there isn't an undue burden upon specific communities. It also might mean adding speed bumps, engaging in smarter road design, and adding speed bumps in certain places so that we limit traffic violations altogether. As it relates to traffic revenue, we believe in investing into under-resourced Black and Hispanic and Indigenous communities, specifically to repair the harm that we know that this bias and discrimination has occurred over the past years. Establishing more community-friendly and innovative mechanisms for ticketing, such as engaging in installment plans for people so they don't get into debtors' prisons, such as having vouchers for broken taillights, because we recognize that nobody drives with a broken taillight intentionally or on purpose, and it's important that we get that fixed. And instituting equitable system of funding of fines, such as day fines that places like Finland do, that's based on sliding scale income, and New Jersey had tried this in the 80s. And finally, I think the 4th demand is right away, as we've seen in the Newsday analysis and the Finn report, we need to start being transparent about the data that's being collected as it relates to traffic data. We believe in engaging in monthly data reports and open source data sets around traffic stops and outcomes and demographics are those who are involved. As a county and as a community, my last statement is that, we have the solutions. The coalition is working with Center for Policing Equity. We are committed to engaging with these solutions. It's simply a matter about whether there's the will to actually solve the problem at hand. Thank you for the time.
Thank you, Terrell. Much appreciated. And if there is documentation and research that you have that's associated with the initiatives that you mentioned, please feel free to share that with us as well. And as John Kamen indicated to other members of your organization and stakeholder group, we would be more than willing to meet with you as well. So thank you. Our next speaker is speaker number 7. Speaker number 7, please unmute yourself.
Yes, hello. Thank you for having this session. I'd like to focus on the parts of the DOJ agreement and the Finn report. In relating very nicely with what Terrell just said, the DOJ made a very clear definition of what needs to be done in the agreement from 2014. And I want to read this one part. SCPD will implement a revised Chapter 13, Section 9 traffic stop data collection as previously approved by the U.S. 1 year after effective date and annually thereafter throughout the pendency of this agreement. Suffolk County Police Department will provide to the United States a report analyzing the collected traffic stop data and explaining what measures, if any, Suffolk County Police Department will take as a result of this analysis. So that in 2014, they signed, the county and the police department signed an agreement that every year they would analyze the data, make recommendations for with any bias. Now, this has not been done until now. Until now, there is just the Finn report with no necessarily recommendations of what they're going to do about bias. All of this time it has been spent doing many things. I know the department has worked hard on this, but it is a huge, huge problem that has been going on for decades, and we have not solved it. Also, the police agreements with the police department says this on the DOJ agreement. The policy that is supposed let me say it again. SCPD's policy on bias-free policing will prohibit officers from using race, color, ethnicity, national origin, religion, or sexual orientation in conducting stops or detentions, or activities following stops or detentions, except when engaging in appropriate suspect-specific activity to identify a particular person or persons. Now, this makes perfect sense, and this would eliminate all bias in traffic stops if it was followed. But as you see in the Newsday and Finn report, it is not exactly followed. But Finn, as an institution, the DOJ recommended that another kind of organization a local organization be involved in analyzing data, and the Finn Institute was chosen. And if you look at the Finn Institute report, to me, there's serious problems with that organization. One, it is a law enforcement organization, and it's not an objective organization. Suffolk County Police Department is listed as a sponsor on that to that organization. Also, throughout the report and in their other writings, they do everything they can to really really poo-poo the concept of procedural justice. And procedural justice is the gold standard and best practices as determined by the Department of Justice. And our governor has told us to consider procedural justice in implementing transforming policing. So that right there, there's a conflict between the Finn Institute and what is considered best practices. Also, I'd like to read you a quick, just one sentence from part of the Finn report. It's on page 9. As the National Academies of Science, Engineering, and Mathematics Committee on Proactive Policing observed, If non-white people are more likely to commit criminal offenses, racial disparities in police-citizen interactions are likely to occur. And then they give a lot of quoting various references that show the following. Earlier reviews of the empirical literature did document relatively higher offending rates among Black people in the United States. Now this, to me, is straight up racism. And this has been debunked by so many institutions, so many research studies. And we know that, for example, with drugs, there's no difference between Black drug users and white drug users, but we know that there's all kinds of documentation. Who is in prison for that more? It's the Black drug users. And so that the whole attitude of Finn needs to be reconsidered. So I urge you my 2 recommendations. One is that we do not use the Finn Institute as the means to create a transformation in our police department. There are many other organizations that are much more reputable and much more non-biased itself. One of them being the Center for Policing and Equity, but there are other sources. And my second recommendation is there are many, many things in the DOJ agreement which are, it doesn't cover all of policing, but it is a well-documented, well-researched, and agreed upon document. It needs to be codified by the legislature so that some of the things in there, for example, the traffic stop data, for example, the definition of bias policing, many other things. If there was legislation that this would be continued, we would not be dependent upon approval for the DOJ all the time, because eventually that's going to end, or changes in administration. It would be a continuous process of implementing these activities and agreements. So that is my two recommendations I would do today.
Thank you, Speaker 7.
You're welcome.
And if you have any supporting documentation, as I've indicated to the other speakers, please feel free to send it to us at public.input@suffolkcountiny.gov.
Thank you.
Thank you. Speaker 8.
Good evening. How you doing?
Good evening.
My name is Aaron Johnson, and I just, I'm an educator at Bayshore High School. My students and I teach African American studies. I teach global history, and I'm actually we're ending our police brutality unit right now. My kids are actually writing a letter to be sent out to all of the legislators in their community, the police commissioner, and stuff like that. We're finishing that off. We finished that today. They should be able to submit it tomorrow to me. And my dissertation was about implicit bias in education, but also about institutional broad implicit bias and structural racism. So I'm going to speak to that a little bit tonight. We continue to speak about police reform as if it is something that's easily achievable. Like tweaks can, we can make tweaks to the system that currently exists, but we rarely look at the foundational and organizational culture of the police. And I mean, like, how do you take the eggs out of a cake after it's been baked? We tend to either ignore or are just ignorant of or fail to understand that the underlying ideology of police departments across the country is a microcosm of the ideology that undergirds American society itself. And that's white American racism. It is a part of every institution, implicitly and explicitly. And this is not hyperbole, it's born out of statistics of the disproportionate stops, arrests, and brutality that befalls Black people. The FBI came out with a report in 2006 that spoke to or highlighted that law enforcement has been infiltrated by white supremacists. That was a report coming out of our own FBI, our criminal justice apparatus, part of it. Black people have known this for years because we have been on the receiving end of American racism across institutions. So because of this, there's a lot of community distrust. So there are a lot of questions that we have regarding what reform looks like. I mean, could we, if we envision the police officers in our community, if we envision them as our oppressors, then how can they be a part of the solution to not oppress us? That's a hard sell for us when we have been on the receiving end for so long. So it's to what extent are police officers' unions preventing more pervasive psychological evaluations and racist and or implicit bias evaluative indicators, exams for their future membership? What, you know, how are they acting as a wedge or an affront to really understanding who's joining their ranks? How often are they tested for PTSD? The last listening session, implicit bias training was discussed. However, implicit bias training is only a small part of culturally responsive education. To what extent are police officers going to be mandated to undergo ongoing professional development for anti-racism? It's not enough for them to say that they're not racist. It's not enough for us to have training sessions, right? This is a cultural thing here. At the end of the day, we need a cultural shift. And reforms and implicit bias training isn't enough. So as we can see by our own statistics, you know, so how can this be actualized? What are the tangible accountability measures we, the public, can look forward to? To what extent will it be transparent? How responsive will you guys be? These different organizations, or how responsive are they going to be to us in the future for our future concerns? Right, this is a listening session now. This is, you know, a mandate came down from the governor, right? So in other words, this wasn't, this didn't get worked into our consciousness until the governor mandated. Meaning it wasn't ourselves. We weren't introspective. We weren't self-reflective, saying we need to do something here, even though we see crazy across the nation dealing with the police brutality issues against Black people. I mean, who has been talking about police brutality? Malcolm X talked about police brutality. Martin Luther King talked about police brutality. The Black Panther Party talked about police brutality. Medgar Evers. The list goes on and on and on in the history of Black people. You can't even mention our history without mentioning the FBI or the criminal justice apparatus. So our officers, and so I had a couple of questions too, because I saw some things in the street that kind of bothered me a little bit. Are officers allowed to display political messaging on their vehicles? I saw a Blue Lives Matter flag sticker on Suffolk PD cruisers. That's completely and utterly disrespectful for kids of color who have been, or people of color who have been involved in instances of brutality. That's a political statement, and my taxes don't pay for political statements. I can wear whatever I want, but if you're working as an agent of the state, I shouldn't see Blue Lives Matter, because what that tells me, that slogan came out as an answer to Black Lives Matter, and it's inherently racist, because everybody understands that Blue Lives Matter as it's not really a life, obviously it's a job, but we understand that. And what's frustrating is that when people say that, I'm like, well, who are you telling? Because the dominant group of people that actually hurt, harm, or kill those blue lives are white people. So how can it be a response to Black Lives Matter? It's insane, and I'm trying to figure that out, because I actually took pictures, and if you want me to send them to you, I can do that. Policing seemingly serve and protect white communities. That's what we have felt for our entire existence, and that they police ours, and they're an occupying force. It brings about, whenever a police officer pulls up behind me and I have my children and my wife in the car, I don't do white knuckles, but I make sure that I do everything that's necessary, you know, to not get pulled over, or when I am pulled over, I do everything according to the talk that all of our parents give us as Black people in American society. Because I don't want to be gunned down. I don't want to be abused or brutalized in front of my kids. And I will always be a threat, because I'm 6'7", 250 pounds. My kids are going to be as big as I am, so they're going to be hypervisible as well. That makes me nervous for them and their future. So at the end of the day, we live in hyper-segregated communities here in Suffolk County. Suffolk County is like the Northern South, as my wife puts it. It's the Alabama of the North. We don't know each other. We're integrated strangers. We're diverse in terms of population, different pockets, but we don't live among each other. We don't know anybody. We don't know each other. So when we see that the police are militarized, we see that they have a lacking of understanding of de-escalation. That's problematic for us. We can't even engage in conversations without condescension, without aggressive speak. So we would just like to be respected, you know, and if you're pulling me over for a ticket, give me my ticket and let me go. We don't need a conversation. You don't have to care about my tone. You don't even have to care if I'm angry. Write the ticket. Nobody should get killed or brutalized over a speeding ticket. So that's just some of the concerns. My students had a whole list of them. And some of them are probably on because it was an assignment. I told them to sign up and screenshot me that they have registered. So that's where we are right now. I have students that are literally scared. I asked them about the election. I asked them about policing. They are scared. And when someone lies to them and says, well, I don't see your color, it's like, I don't see your experiences. I don't acknowledge your struggle. And so we want to get to the heart of what reform actually is going to be, because reform scares me. That word scares me because it doesn't say change. It doesn't say shift. It means tweak the system. Let's try to fix what's broken. But fundamentally, you cannot build a house on a faulty foundation. It's going to crumble and collapse. So I have a lot of recommendations. I'm not going to bore everybody, and I'm not going to, do too much. I've already kind of gone past my time, but I am here as a resource in the community. I'm in the town of Babylon. I'm in North Babylon. So I missed the last time I was supposed to be like speaker 16 or whatever. So that's me.
Thank you very much, Speaker 8. I did send you a message. I gave you my email address, so you'll have the ability, whatever you'd like to send to me, please feel free to do so. And we appreciate you actually making this an assignment for your students.
Thank you.
To come on board, because we have to all be engaged in this process. So I appreciate that, and I did send you my email address.
Thank you.
Thank you. Speaker 9, please unmute yourself. Speaker 9, last name Gardner, please unmute yourself.
Hi.
Hello.
I didn't realize I was speaker 9. I'm a member of the Long Island for Policing group and with the Huntington Rapid Response Network. And, everything that has been spoken, I don't even want to go into and repeat it because they've spoken more eloquently than I have. But I'm a 73-year-old woman. I've been driving my whole career. And as I read that report, I realized that I have never been treated in the way that Black and brown people have been treated in this country. I have been stopped for a speeding ticket, never was told to get out of my car, never treated poorly. I was stopped for holding a cell phone. Again, actually the police let me go. They said, oh, I guess, I said, well, I had an emergency, but really. And this was, I was reading these reports as your average citizen. I'm appalled that this country has continued to do this. And I don't want to say anymore, this is it, my time is done, but other people like myself have read this. And we are seeing what's going on with the police, and we are not happy. The treatment is not equal. It is not how this should work. So that's all I'm going to bring up. And, like I said, as an average citizen who has seen these reports about the traffic stops and the way people are treated, it's, as far as I'm concerned, I don't think people should feel safe. Black and brown people shouldn't feel safe when they're stopped by the police. And that is criminal on the part of the system and the police department. And that's it.
Thank you, Speaker 9. Speaker 10.
Hi, I'm Speaker 10. Can you hear me?
You sure can.
Okay, I live in precinct number 2, and I want to speak about mental health and substance abuse. I have had very limited interaction with police and not in that area. I feel very passionate about those issues, actually for family reasons, but my birth family lives in Indiana, and I'm only mentioning them because I think there are 2 relevant experiences I had with them. One is I have a sister who's severely mentally ill, lives in Indiana. She's 70. She has been cared for in that community by several different institutions over her lifetime. And I bring that up only because I think it's a much smaller community. There are 40,000 in the town. So there is a real sense of community and of knowing who you're dealing with. Oh, this is Miriam. And I think that's a hard thing to achieve on Long Island because there's so many people and there's a lot of anonymity. So I think that makes accountability harder, and that makes help for people who are mentally ill harder. And I think that's a challenge that we as a community, as Long Island, need to grapple with by providing mental health mobile crisis teams that are readily accessible to our communities. I have a statement I'm going to read about it. I just want to mention something else relevant to mobile crisis teams. And this is also personal experience. So my dad, who's passed away, but he was a physician in this town that we grew up in. And back then they made house calls. And I remember him having patients who were experiencing a mental health crisis, and he as their physician would go to their house to help them and to de-escalate. And I remember having a conversation with him that if he needed the police, he could call the police and they would help him, but he didn't typically need that. And so I'm going to read this because I feel that having a first responders who are not under the purview of the police department is very important to me. So thanks for giving me an opportunity to speak. And I do feel that it's relevant to Governor Cuomo's executive order. I participate in the mental health and substance abuse work group of Long Island United to transform policing and community safety. We recognize that all of us know and care about people, family, friends, and neighbors who have experienced a mental health crisis or substance abuse. I've lived long enough to know almost everybody I know has a relationship in some way with somebody who's had one of these problems. We are concerned that our loved ones face stigma and are marginalized, and that some may be harmed by police or unnecessarily become ensnared in the criminal justice system. And I've been reading for years about how so many mentally ill are in our jails and prisons. And I lived through the time when the psychiatric hospitals were closed, and we were supposed to have community mental health readily available to people, and that really never happened. I have private health insurance, so it was never an issue for me, but that's not true of many people. We, as Long Island mental health professionals, teachers, lawyers, and consumers, and I'm speaking about our mental health work group and substance abuse work group, we are asking to be included in Suffolk County's process to draft a plan to specifically address the needs of each precinct. We are committed to the protection, treatment, and integration of our most vulnerable people, both in our communities and in our criminal justice system. To this end, we would like an agency of first responders, independent of, but in collaboration with the police, if safety is a concern, as determined by the delineated protocol of a designated dispatcher. And by the way, the state of Georgia has available online the protocols that they have for the dispatchers for the mobile health crisis team. It's a great document, which I'll email to you guys if you want. Okay, so this agency must be available and culturally competent to each and every community in Suffolk County. The phone numbers, such as 988, must be widely disseminated by social media throughout Suffolk County. 988 is supposed to be in effect by July 2022. So whatever happens, like let's say DASH gets expanded, there needs to be, I think, we need to be thinking forward that hopefully whatever services are available here will be able to make use of such a simple phone number. We would also like to train dispatchers to connect community members directly to the alternate response in order to reduce the use of armed police in these interactions. Mobile crisis teams must be readily available 24/7, 365 days a year to de-escalate and provide the necessary assistance, including transportation to a site, such as Family Service League's DASH program. I think they have 2 mobile crisis teams and they're opening something on the East End now, but their response time is delayed because they may have to travel the length of Long Island. A protocol must be developed to determine if and when either hospitalization or incarceration is required. If a person with a diagnosis of mental health or substance abuse disorder is incarcerated, that person must be provided with appropriate and humane treatment during the incarceration and upon release. I think the Stepping Up initiative, they did a webinar recently and it talks about their goal is to have everybody with a mental health issue who's released to have 100% connection to resources upon release. The funding for the agency of the first responder and the treatment of the person in crisis must be from known sources, whether it be federal, state, and county departments or a combination thereof, as well as private health care. And I think about, wow, get Northwell, involved in expanding on these kinds of resources. Information about all existing funding, protocols, statistics, and data of these agencies and any relevant procedures must be gathered and made available to the public and subjected to the review of an entity other than the police. And thank you for giving me this opportunity to speak.
Thank you very much, Speaker Ten. And if there's information that you'd like to share, once again, it's in the chat and feel free to share that information.
Thank you.
Speaker 11. Last name Jones, Speaker 11.
Yes, how you doing?
Hi, how are you?
Great, how about yourself? My name is Amaru Jones. I'm president of Leaders of the New School. And I think the main reason why I wanted to attend this meeting today is I was blessed with the opportunity to teach kids at a charter school in Queens, New York. And while we were on a Zoom call today, one of the bright kids in the class contacted me and said, Mr. Jones, who's gonna protect me today? And I was asked as in which way, because I know the election is a crazy process and things like that. But she said, what if I see things online that people may do this and may do that depending on who wins the election. And what if the police believe those same ideologies that the other people are promoting? And I was like, what do you mean by other people? When I was trying to be more exact with her, make sure she says what she wants. She was like, what if people are just listening to certain things that the president says and it could hurt me and my loved ones and my friends? And it kind of left me in a very weird place, especially with the entire class that was listening to her speak, because she is a student that always projects how she feels and projects how she thinks about certain situations that are going on in the world and very up to date. And it kind of made me think to myself back into Huntington, a place that I grew up, is that I definitely had these same thoughts in my head when it came to just simple things as building that disconnect with that relationship with police officers in the community. I think as of a person that, like myself, that has never gotten in trouble with the law, has never done anything, I still find myself in situations that I felt uncomfortable. And I've always felt myself in situations as if I had no one to lean on or nobody to believe what I said. It tends to make me a little frustrated, but I feel like this is just a start to how we have to start establishing that relationship somehow, such as maybe simple things such as just saying hi, saying what's up. I do know that there could be the same energy felt on the other way, especially with police officers towards the people of the community because of the lack of that relationship they do have. But I still feel like we still need to take a step in the right direction with that. So maybe just saying like certain things, like just giving resources to people in the community that you see, or helping out kids, because I feel like a lot of times, luckily enough with the certain people that I've had in my life, and especially in the school district, I wouldn't be where I am today without certain people giving me that hand to grab and pulling me up as I was working hard. But I also do know that I have peers of mine that didn't have that hand to grab on, especially community things, and such as police officers specifically, that they couldn't go to, especially when they felt like they needed something or certain help, or because they just felt like that's not a thing to do, especially in the community that I live in, because it was not considered the right thing to do because of that big disconnect that I continue to speak about. I just want to just establish my opinion on just making sure that we are going in the right direction with maybe just doing simple things, specifically the Huntington precinct, just going, just say hi, knocking on people's doors, saying what's up, just simple things that we may not think it's something big, but you're also establishing a relationship with kids and young adults at the same time. I do know there's police officers in certain high schools that can help establish that relationship, but sometimes I feel like that is a little too late because you often leave an impression at the younger the age for that scholar in particular. So I guess the main thing that I wanted just to wrap around for my, I guess, the closing is that maybe that we just have to do certain things, just, I guess, for the precinct and ourselves and community, specifically activists like myself, to kind of just make this big standstill and kind of establish this relationship and starting to get the integrity for both parts, and kind of making sure that these police officers are here to help us, but we're also not people that are here to harm them. So I also want to make sure that we can establish that some way or somehow. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Speaker 11. Appreciate it. Speaker 12.
How you guys doing? My name is Randy Paul. Sadly, I like to pass. Amaru took a lot of points that I want to speak on with him, so thank you guys.
Feel free, if you have particular comments that he might have spoken on or might not have spoken on, take the opportunity to please to share it with us as well.
Of course, thank you very much.
You're welcome. Speaker 13.
Hi, everybody. My name is Tim. My pronouns are he, him, his, and I am the co-chair of the Suffolk County Democratic Socialists of America. Last week, I spoke about the county's backward protest protocols that enable racist violence from motorists under the guise of safety. This time, I want to speak a little more briefly about the police department's desperate hypocrisy when it comes to its share of the county budget, and the general defensiveness of police departments when it comes to public oversight and control. Proposition 2 on the Suffolk County ballot passed last night. Ostensibly, the county is now able to take excess funds from the Sewer Stabilization Reserve Fund and give it to cops, according to County Executive Ballone. It appears that despite previous responses to defunding the police, the county can, in fact, shift around funds in the budget when it decides to put it to a vote. My rhetorical questions are, why did it take a global pandemic to find these supposed excess funds, and who decides what excess means? I can tell you that voters will not be deciding that. The reality is that the police are one of the most defensive institutions in our society. Supposedly a public service, the police are the quickest to weaponize their jobs as something beyond critique. The exclusivity of this task force is duly noted, as is the fact that these listening sessions are not strongly promoted. And this is not an accident. What might make these listening sessions something worth publicizing is a public debate surrounding the power dynamics between the police and the communities they supposedly protect and serve. Racist policing is often justified because police have to go where the crime is, and that Black and brown communities want more police. But if that's true, it follows that other public services should be as deeply entrenched in their communities. Strong schools, libraries, affordable housing, and good jobs, among other things. Of course, they aren't. The actual material needs of people are ignored, while ballot initiatives are presented to give more money to cops. I suspect that this is because the salaries and livelihoods of some people on this very call depend on these needs being ignored. Thank you.
Thank you, Speaker 13. Appreciate it. Speaker 14. Speaker 14 with the last name Aravalo.
Are you spell the last name? Are you referring to me?
No, you're Speaker 22.
Okay.
Thank you. Speaker 14, we will pass over Speaker 14 and we will come back. Speaker 15.
Hello, everyone. My name is Pastor Dan Rivera. I pastor Huntington Assembly of God here in beautiful Huntington Station. There are just quick things I would like to mention on behalf of our community when it comes to police reform. Number one, the cultural understanding of the community that the police are serving. Many times police are called into a situation and into a community or into a pocket of a community because there is a crime happening or a situation happening. When the police are only in those neighborhoods for negative reasons, it creates a mentality that this community is completely negative. There is no good happening within the community. If police who maybe do not represent the culture at large that they are serving are just in those places when things go bad, the assumption is that everything and everyone is bad, and that can happen very easily. So the solution, hopefully, to that is to, number one, bring in officers, as has been relayed a little bit, bring in officers to the community in other times other than a National Police Out Day, other than other simple community events, but actually to live, breathe, and be involved in community activities throughout the year, so that when they come into Huntington Station, they don't come with pretenses that everything and everyone in Huntington Station is doing something harmful. Number two, we want to establish a system of accountability. The NYPD has already established body cameras, and we are hoping that that can also be established also inside of Suffolk County Police Department as well. Number three, the accountability of bad cops. We've heard the arguments of everyone has bad apples, and that's everywhere. There's probably a couple bad apples in my church too. That's everywhere. You're gonna see it, right? But the reality is that the bad apples must be held accountable. The reasons of distrust have been founded on certain police officers who simply just get reprimanded or talking to, rather than actual accountability for their actions, suspensions, or any other actions that would advise the police to stop doing what they're doing, because there's actually going to be some consequences. The Suffolk County Police Department has done a great job of hiring minority officers or trying to outreach to minority officers, and we hope that that continues and actually hire more minority officers. And finally, the elimination of the old boys club. I come from a family of police officers. I want and pray for my family to come home safely every night. That's what I want for my family members. But I know that there are just systems, as Speaker 8 referred to, systems that are just seem to be unbreakable, that just can't be reformed but must be changed. And the accountability with addressing bad cops and promoting and encouraging good cops and giving them opportunities to grow within the police department, not just because of who they know, of who they're friends with, but actually reward them for being actually good cops, will go a long way in creating accountability within our communities, within the police department themselves, and eliminate that old boys club mentality that only promotes based on relationship. And we ask that these things taken into consideration. Finally, as a person who lives and breathes in Huntington Station, the Bible tells me to honor where honor man is due, and Inspector Scrimmer is an amazing inspector. He listens, he helps, he's doing a great job of trying to bring change. And so I want to honor him, and thank you for your time today.
Thank you, Pastor Danny. Appreciate it. Speaker 16. Speaker 16, the last name La.
Did you say law or?
No, it just says LA. Okay, we will come back to speaker 16. Speaker 17.
Okay, that's me.
Hello.
Hello, everyone. Hi. Hello, everyone. My name is Freya Cruz. I am, first I want to say thank you for allowing me the opportunity to speak. Again, my name is Freya Cruz. I am an organizer with the Suffolk County chapter of the Democratic Socialists of America. And I just want to discuss political violence and the police's response and role in it. Now, there is no doubt that tensions have been high in Suffolk County from what I've seen, and we are arguably probably the most divided that we have been in recent memory. And much of that has to do with the current political climate, namely the presidential election that is happening right now as we speak. This isn't helped by the president himself, his supporters, and the broader Republican Party. More specifically, far-right militias and agitators who are incited to violence by the president and his administration's constant remarks. And it is a fact that we have seen a dramatic rise in right-wing violence recently in this country. And there is reason to fear that these groups will be empowered to commit violence and intimidate their opponents and their enemies, regardless of the outcome of this election. For example, in Texas, very recently, there was a Trump caravan that swarmed, endangered, and a Biden campaign bus ramming into it for about 40 minutes and blocking traffic, and forcing them to cancel a campaign event. In Michigan, the FBI foiled a plot by a far-right militia group, or I think it was a few of them, who planned to kidnap the governor of Michigan and give her a trial, which you can only assume what that means, seeing as she is a Democrat. This is in addition to numerous other incidents that have happened throughout the country in this year and the past year alone. And what concerns me is that these incidents have been either brushed aside or applauded by Trump and the Republican Party, including some here in New York. Now, in the last 25 years, 329 murders have been attributed to far-right violence, 39 in 2019 alone. Only one was attributed to far-left violence, and that was the attacker himself. Now, these groups, such as the Proud Boys, Three Percenters, and even the Ku Klux Klan, have made their presence known on Long Island, and there is significant crossover with President Trump's supporters, who are numerous here in Suffolk. And as an openly queer person, I worry for my safety, along with the safety of Black, Latino, and Indigenous people, with the way things are currently going, from what I can observe. So my questions are, if you want to answer these right away or later on, go ahead. These are what I'm wondering. Does the SCPD recognize this growing movement as a threat to order and the general safety of residents? If so, how will they protect us from the violence that very well may occur during and or after this election? And if not, why? Now, seeing as somebody mentioned earlier, the FBI itself has found that white nationalists have infiltrated police departments across the country, and police unions and officers are overwhelmingly in support of Trump and the Republican Party. So I will go ahead and make the assumption that it might have to do with the conflict of interest. And I would hope that, my hope is that that is proven wrong. And that's all I have to say. Thank you. And I can provide, if anybody wants like sources on anything that I have claimed so far, please feel free to ask for them. I can send them.
Very good. If you'd like to send them to us, you can at public.input@suffolkcountynY.gov. Portia or Christian, if you could put that in the chat so that Speaker 17 can send that information as well. Thank you, Speaker 17.
Thank you.
Speaker 18, please unmute yourself. Speaker 18, last name Stark.
Yes, that's me. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I had a couple of things that have come to mind as I'm listening to people. One of them is the issue of the mobile crisis team. Now, when I was working in Social Services Department at Nassau County, we worked with mobile crisis team that was very effective in de-escalating incidents of mental health, and they worked with the police very, very well. But they would kind of defunded, and it became, you know, they were really not able to address the issues that we needed. So I would agree that that's something that really should be looked into. The other thing that I wanted to talk about was concern about the disparity with the traffic stops and how it's disproportionately affects people of, you know, people of color, Black, brown, and the difference in the experiences that I have had as a white person whenever I've had an encounter with police. And maybe it was a few years ago, I was stopped. I was exceeding the speed limit on my way home from, I had gone out to dinner with a friend, and maybe I had a glass of wine. And it was a few hours later, and I was probably not paying attention and had the music on, and I had exceeded the speed limit. So I was pulled over, and it was nothing but a very positive experience. The officer came over, first thing he asked me, "Are you all right? Have you had anything to drink?" When I told him yes, it was a few hours. And I mean, there was nothing. I did not have to feel afraid of being searched or told to get out of the car or treated in a violent manner or harassed for any reason. And I know that's one of the things that went through my mind at the time. And so I felt, you know, reading the latest reports and just concern about the fact that, yes, there is a inherent bias, and just my own experience makes me realize that I'm treated differently. And so that was really what I had wanted to say, and I thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you, Speaker 18. Much appreciated for your comment. Speaker 19, please unmute yourself. The last name Mian or Mian? Mian or Mian? Speaker 19. We will come back to Speaker 19. Speaker 20.
Hi, everyone. My name is Shaniqua Levin, and I am the co-convener for the Long Island United to Transform Policing and Community Safety, as well as the founder for the Women's Diversity Network and Long Island Black Alliance. I speak with you tonight for many reasons. As a community organizer, I often find myself out there hearing some of the worst scenarios it comes to when people are dealing with police. And in the beginning, you start to think that these are the worst case scenarios. But then you start hearing more and more and more, and especially when you're talking to Black folks, very rarely do you hear of positive encounters with the police officers. So we have to stop thinking that these are just bad apples or these are the worst case scenarios. This is a broken system, a system that was never designed with Black people in mind, that was never designed to create and have equitable treatment for all. So it's time that we really take a look at transforming the system and not superficial transformations. Yes, diversity training is needed, but we can't cure racism. And especially, I know I've spoken to Police Commissioner Hart before, especially if it's just a one-time thing where people are getting this, training once in their career. If it's not an ongoing thing, if it's not something that is being checked, where they're having someone come from the outside and doing evaluations to see how they're dealing with their bias training. We need to look at other things. Let's take a look at the fact that when people are beaten by police officers, these police officers are not being put on, at least being put on desk duty. We have a young man who was sitting outside of his driveway with a group of friends. And as he sat outside of his driveway with a group of friends, they kept seeing a car passing them. They were young and experienced and realized that it was undercovers. So when the car started slowing up to them, they started to flee because they got scared, thinking it may be gang activity. These police officers eventually pulled them over after these young men called 911 in fear of their safety. These police officers pulled them over, beat them, called them the N-word, and left them with bruises, a concussion, and bloody. Now, they were not arrested for anything. They weren't taken into custody, none of that. And yet these police officers are still out there walking around. Do you think that this re-traumatizes these young men every time they see this police officer still patrolling their community? Why is it that police officers are treated like they're gods? Why are they not human beings who are treated just like every other profession? In other professions, you cannot get away with beating the crap out of someone and then going back out in the streets the next day. So my recommendation to you, because I understand that you can't put a police officer on desk duty for every single complaint, but when there's use of force, there should be a restrictive assignment such as desk duty. When someone has, come into encounter with the person and has caused some type of bodily harm, there should be a definite assignment definite restrictive assignment for them. There should be no way that until the investigation is done, that they should be still out there patrolling the streets. That is something we really have to take a look at, because people are out there in the streets marching because their lives have been beaten. Because they feel disproportionately have bias against them. They feel threatened by the police. They feel that their rights are constantly under attack. And one of the things that we can do to help with that is at least take these officers off the streets when these kind of complaints are made. So definitely my recommendation is to look on how do we change that system? How do we not let these officers that are out there using this force like this remain out there terrorizing our community? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Speaker 20. Speaker 21, last name Terrell, Speaker 21. Okay, we will go to Speaker 22.
Hello.
Hello. How are you?
I'm well, thank you. I'm coming to you from the perspective of a concerned mother. I wanted to give you the perspective of the talk that we have. First, I'm just glad that it was finally acknowledged in the presidential debate, the last one between our two candidates, that it is a real conversation that we have with our children and preparing them before they walk outside. When they become, by the time they're age 9 and 10 and can walk outside simply to the bus stop, we as Black parents have to give our children this talk and tell them, make sure you have ID on you, make sure you have money in your pocket, because you can get arrested for vagrants. Because our kids are not only being stopped while driving, they're being stopped by walking down the street and asked, where are you going? And who are you? And what's your name? And do you have ID? And, what are you doing in this neighborhood? Even if they live in the neighborhood, what are you doing? What are your plans? And so we have to have this conversation with our children to prep them and, just remind them, like, we teach our children manners, but we have to tell them, let your manners be on 10, when you're being approached. That way, so to ensure that our kids are doing the most that they can to de-escalate, an officer that might come with, whatever agenda they come with. And so, as also as a parent, I have 2 kids that are, they have driving permits, but I've been very hesitant to even, allow them to go get the driving, go finish and get their licenses as of right now, because I want to minimize this kind of activity where they might possibly get stopped just because of the color of their skin. And so, having said that, I have a question. What does the training look like in detail? Is it just a textbook training, or is there a perspective that will awaken the conscience of the police officers that are, called to serve? And what is being done to change their perspective of what it is to serve the community? Because when you are in a position of service, service-oriented positions, you're not a lord or a king over a person. You are to serve and help and protect. Your hand, is in the shape of a giving, not, of an oppression. So those are a few questions I have. I have another question. What, as far as like mental health goes, I'm not a mental health expert, although I read a lot about, the psychological effects on, a lot of things that we go through. And my question is, what does the department do for police officers that have killed people? And do they take a tally of how many individuals they have killed, whether it was, either in self-defense or however they label it, what kind of mental health maintenance do they give the police officers? Because, from what I understand, the more you kill, the more it gets easier to kill from things that I've read, because the conscience begins to get seared, and it's almost as if some have become licensed serial killers. So what is being done to maintain their mental health after they have killed a human being? I'd like to know so that I have more confidence, because if I don't know the details of what the training looks like, I can't be confident that I'll be okay to stop having the talk with my kids. That concludes my questions.
Thank you, Speaker 22. I have a clarifying question. When you spoke about the first question you asked is, what does the training look like? And then the second thing you were speaking about was particularly in reference to mental health maintenance and what does that training or support look like for police officers? The first training you were referring to, were you referring to particular implicit, were you referring to any particular training or just training in general of police officers that they would go through?
The training that they're being given or will be given to prevent them from, or I guess educate them from behaving in a manner that is that will basically undo police brutality. I don't know the exact training.
So I think you may be referring to implicit bias training as well as use of force and de-escalation.
Yes.
About right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you, Speaker 22.
Okay, you're welcome.
Speaker 23, I think you actually spoke as Speaker 1, so I'm just going to go back through the list for those.
No, I didn't.
Oh, you didn't?
Somebody was having trouble getting in.
Oh, okay, great. Very good. Speaker 23.
All right, thank you. So I appreciate you holding the listening session and giving the public the chance to speak. And I have a couple of different comments. The first thing is, as I've been listening, I hear about community policing and how we need to improve relationships over and over. And I find myself getting really triggered and really resentful. I'm a white woman. I spent my whole life growing up in Huntington, and never once did anybody say my safety depends on if I'm friends with a person with a gun. I didn't need a PAL team to be safe. I didn't need to have police officers throwing me barbecues. I needed adults in my life. I needed mentors. I needed that either funded by my parents who had the opportunity to develop wealth on Long Island, and we're very clear about the underpinnings of how that happened and the racial disparities. We need services for human services and social services for all communities on Long Island. I resent the fact, and I think what we're saying is coded language that for Black and brown people to be safe, they have to be friends with the police. Because nobody ever told me that as a white woman. That was never an expectation. So when we move to looking at what does real reform look like, what does true safety look like for community, I've gotten involved. I'm a steering committee member with Long Island United to transform policing and community safety. I'm proud to be a part of an amazing coalition that has been doing our research, and we've been doing our homework. And I hope and expect that all of you who are sitting on the task force have been equally doing your homework and your research, because there are mountains of research about what actually works. So let's talk about what doesn't work. What doesn't work and is proven not to work is community policing. What doesn't work and is proven not to work is implicit bias training. What doesn't work and is proven not to work is continuing to fund police and overpopulating Black and brown communities with police officers. We know this. This isn't up for discussion. So I encourage you to access the resources. I would be happy to send anything over. I'm also a steering committee member with Long Island Network for Change. We hosted Dr. Alex Vitale, a professor who studies policing and community safety here in Brooklyn. His wife works on Long Island. He has extensive research about what truly makes community safe. Dr. Philip Goff, I understand that Suffolk may be working with the Center for Policing Equity. I'm very excited about that. Our group's been working with them. Dr. Philip Goff has a fantastic podcast with Ezra Klein recently. I'd love to send it over to talk all about the racial underpinnings of policing and what needs to change for true community safety, because we're talking about safety. This isn't about I need to be anti-police. This is about what is pro-safety. So I want to specifically talk, and I prepared a statement with regard to mental health. I'm a clinical social worker. I've spent a lot of my career going into homes as alternative to incarceration treatment with delinquent youth and working with families to prevent removal of children into foster care. And I always resent these memes, these things that come out from these, excuse me, but arrogant police officers saying like, what are you gonna send a social worker in? I have had more training, more hours in the classroom, more hours in the field, and passed more exams on how to de-escalate, on how to interact with people, on how to do crisis management. And yes, we are talking about social workers, we are talking about medics, and we are talking about people with crisis intervention training to work with people who need help. So with regard to mental health, there is a movement sweeping the country right now to transform how we deal with mental health. And the movement is away from armed police officers who are not equipped, even if they have the best intentions, they are not equipped with the type of training to deal with this, because mental health, substance use, and homelessness are not criminal issues. They're health issues, and they require a health response. So, healthcare response to mental health crises are universally considered the best practice. The leaders of CIT International, that's the training program to train officers, armed officers, in mental health. I believe we use it here on Long Island. The CIT International group consists primarily of police. They were created, this training, 35 years ago. They now argue that the only a mental health care response is appropriate for a mental health crisis. They now argue in their current CIT International's recent best practice guide, they say not even a co-responder model where you have police and a mental health worker, that is still inappropriate because it involves police. The presence of armed police officers can agitate a situation and create harm up to and including death. And we need to look no further, certainly, than Daniel Prude. And I'm sure there are countless names of people who have suffered when they needed help. So I am calling, and Long Island United is calling, as are so many places across the country, for an alternate response to mental health crises, substance use, and homelessness that do not include police. This is currently being done in Eugene, Oregon with the Cahoots program. It's happened for over 30 years. They, last year alone, had 250,000 calls routed to them. Only 250 times did they need to call in an armed officer. This is being done in Denver, Colorado through the STAR pilot program. No police. This is being done in San Francisco, California. It's being explored in New York City through the CCIT program. So I am urging you, I'm also the chair of the Alternative Response for Mental Health. I know Speaker 10 spoke to it before with Long Island United. We meet weekly for an hour and a half. I'm not just trying to come here and speak and be angry. I'm doing my research. We are getting together. We've researched models. We have talked to the DASH program with Family Service League. We would urge you, we would like to submit a proposal in the near future. We would love you to come to our meetings so that we can talk about what are alternative responses that can truly keep community members safe, because I know we all have that same goal in mind. We'd like to expand things like the DASH program that has an alternative response that does not use police. There's a lot of details with that. We're going to have to train 911 dispatchers in order to assess calls differently so they can route, instead of only to police, route to an alternative model. And it's possible, and it's happening around the country. And I know our group and so many others would like to be a part of the process to really continue to make that progressive movement forward, because it's truly safe for everyone. So I appreciate the opportunity to speak here today. And I appreciate your hard work, and I'm happy to send over any resources if you can tell me where I should be sending those. And I think that's all I got. Thank you.
Thank you, Speaker 23. In the chat, we just put in there once again, public.info@suffolkcountyn.gov. We thank you for the invitation that you extended, and we will be reaching out to take you up on that invitation as well. Thank you. At this point, we have completed the list of speakers, but we're going to go back to those that we that did not respond to their call out. So Speaker 5, last name Marchetta. Speaker 5, last name Marchetta. Okay, Speaker 14, last name Aravallo. Speaker 14, last name Aravallo. Speaker 16, last name L.A. La. Speaker 16. Speaker 19, last name Meehan. Speaker 19. And we have concluded with the speakers that were slated. I know Portia has asked in the chat a couple of times if there is someone else that is on the call that would like to have an opportunity. We will open it up to 3 additional speakers at this time. So if you could put in the chat if you would like to speak, please feel free to do so and we can call on you. So I'll give you a minute to do so. Speaker 6, you yielded your time, but you would like it back. So Speaker 6, we are giving you your time.
Great, thank you so much. My name is June Margolin. I'm the president of Huntington Matters. We're a community organization that serves the town of Huntington and run a Facebook group called Huntington Matters Community Forum and another one called Huntington Matters. And our primary function of, one of our primary functions of the Facebook group is to function as a neighborhood watch. We formed after, I mean, we know the background here, but really quick, going back to, wait, let me look at my notes here. The leader of the New School. He was saying when he grew up, there was a big disconnect, Amaru, with the police growing up, and he's 100% right. We were all treated like complete garbage, and I can own by the police, white people too, not responding, you know, mocking you when they came, if they came, it was terrible. So I can only imagine what the Black community went through too during that time with the added pressures of the racism undertones. That was one of the reasons why we formed, though, was to transform this relationship. And honestly, over the last 6 years, I can say that the Suffolk County Police Department has made great strides in the 2nd Precinct area to improve that relationship. They have committed many, many, many hours, taken up nearly every suggestion that the community has given them to improve this relationship. And that experience is still ongoing and still building. So I'm super, super proud of them, honestly. And a lot of people on this call were part of that as well. A lot of familiar names and faces and continue to be. I definitely agree that there are these vacuums, you know, as great as these certain things are going, there are other areas where there's complete vacuums of service. And I also personally witnessed a long time ago, but personally witnessed in the car an experience with a police officer profiling a passenger who's Black in the car with me and my girlfriend, white. We were all going out clubbing, and it was just incredibly strange to us. We could not understand what was happening. And as we drove away, he said, "This is the life of being a Black man on Long Island." And it was shocking. So I feel that palpable still to this day. And it pains me that despite Risco's program, her Department of Justice program, with the implicit bias training with the police department, for the last 3 years, I believe it's been going. And we had that big win where it was just approved for national use and training other officers across the country. I was really upset to see the statistics with the traffic stops, and wondering if Risco has any comments or feedback about that in her insights in working this program and working directly with the officers, plus the formerly incarcerated population, where she maybe sees, I think she's the wealth of knowledge on this, some places to improve that. I also think that the recruiting guidelines for hiring police officers are way too limited. I think that's part of the separation that's created, going based only on the civil service exam and top high numbers scored. And the only extra points you get is if you were previously military or could speak Spanish or came from another police department. I feel like that limits us to the quality of the officers that can join our communities. We need to have a broader hiring process. Maybe look at, I have not done the research, but I know DA Cini has mentioned in some of his calls that we are one of the most limited in the country with our hiring processes. So I think that definitely needs to be looked at and reevaluated. The other thing I would like to, my suggestion is having social workers in each precinct. Like we have access to the DA now, you know, the ADAs are in each precinct for processing arrests and everything for discovery. Why can't there also be social workers? And of course, we know the answer to that question is funding, because we barely have enough social workers to even take care of our child's issues, you know, CPS, et cetera, and the needs of the general population of the county. But that is definitely a place that I agree we need to invest some serious funding. The other thing is three more points. One is the undocumented community. It's just a travesty what's happening. It's like, we live it in Huntington Station. There's a group, and it's not the same people. It's a rotating group of individuals that are homeless and undocumented and addicted, and they refuse help and support, and they have mental health issues, and there's a vacuum for them. And I understand, and we have been told clearly over and over again that the county, the government, will not spend a penny on services and resources for these individuals because those pennies come from taxpayers. And how would the taxpayers feel and behave if they knew that money was being diverted to people who are not citizens versus people who are citizens who may need help and need the beds and all that stuff too? We need to look at this, in my opinion, and I know this is highly politicized. We have to look at this as humanity and as a community, because having mothers step over a passed out drunk guy on the sidewalk in front of Community Market to go to the grocery store is not okay. And why can't that guy get what he needs, right? Why can't he get access to those services so we can get him off the sidewalk at least and having some, you know, kind of a future? And I know that's very politicized and there's a zillion layers to that, but I just had to say that. The other part is the Terrell. I hope I'm saying your name right. Am I pronouncing your name right? I love how you had all those alternatives to the traffic stop enforcement. I just want to highlight something that I think every single person on this call needs to do. Every single one of you must take the Suffolk County Police Department Civilian Police Academy, please. I'm begging you. I don't know if any of you from the 2nd Precinct remember the near murder of Officer Collins. That was the result of a traffic stop. And that was recreated in our Civilian Police Academy class. 4 people in a car, 2 officers responding, pulling them over for a traffic stop. It was a taillight, supposedly. You know, who knows whatever. They ended up being 4 gang members in the car. I don't know the details of the investigation, but they ended up being 4 gang members in the car. 2 officers responded. We replayed that role play 3 times. All 3 times, us as the officers were killed. All 3 times. And that's exactly what happened to Officer Collins. They pulled him over. The guy in the back seat had a gun in his waistband, jumps out of the back seat, runs. Officer Collins chases him. You leave 1 officer back to handle the car of 4 other people to try and keep them contained while he's chasing this. You don't know if these other people have weapons or not. So the bottom line is putting a civilian in that position is absolute madness. I mean, unless there is like this, you know, utopian cultural shift where everybody knows that the guy pulling you over to give you a ticket is, I don't even know. I just find that to be like so dangerous. So I think those statistics, Jerry Hart maybe, definitely, and Risco could look at the statistics of how often traffic stops end up turning into something like that with a violent interaction. And if it's like a fraction of 1%, then okay, we handle that, we deal with that, we find a workaround. But some of these traffic stops do not end well for the officers, 100%. So I'm trying to think. I think that's everything. Oh, transparency from the police department. This is my last thing, and I've begged for it ever since we formed and had our public Facebook group. We would love for an officer from the precinct or more than one to actually interact on social media with the people asking the questions that post and say, why is there a helicopter? What's going on? Whatever. There are other communities in the country that have their COPE officers doing that. And it is so incredibly successful for building a police community relationship. And the fact that SCPD does not allow their officers at all to interact on social media, I think is like cutting us off at the knees in this relationship of community building. In my personal opinion, really bad. You gotta at least give 1 or 2 people per precinct the training to be able to do that and respond, because it is night and day difference in, you know, the perception. And behind a screen name, you don't know what color anybody is. You don't know what language they speak. It doesn't matter. And you can start that, you know, not face-to-face kind of relationship building on social media in a non-threatening environment, answering simple questions and learning about how policing works. And that's it. Sorry, love you guys. Thanks.
Thank you, Speaker 6. At this time, we have individuals that have indicated that they would like to provide public comment. Once again, we'll remind you that public comment is limited to 3 minutes. And then if we need to, if we can come back to you, then we can do so. We're going to solicit public comment from those that have not spoken and provided comment thus far and input thus far. So at this point in time, I call on Kevin Thorburn. Kevin Thorburn. We'll skip Kevin. I know he's on, but maybe he's having difficulty unmuting. So the next person will be Kimberly Girardeau. Kimberly?
Yes. Hi, everyone. Thank you for calling on me. I am Kimberly Girardeau, and I would like to speak on what works. I also own Premier Productions, and it is important to me to involve the police with what I am doing. And it's very important to me to connect with the youth, the residents, and organizations. So what I did was I had partnered with Martine McDonald, who is the Master of Social Work for Huntington Tri-CYA. He works with the youth. And I also partnered with Kevin Thorburn, who is the Director of Minority Affairs. And what we have done was we had collaborated with each other, and we had put together an event at the Cinema Arts Center. And we had open mic. It was a wonderful event. The slots was filled from the youth to adults. There was singing, there was dancing, there was poems, and we had also involved everyone. We had invited everyone to our event. And Deputy Commissioner Risco mentioned Lewis had came to our event. The police was there because we had invited them. So I say that to say there are many ways where we can make this work. We have to contact each other, you know, say, hey, this is what we're doing on this day. Would you like to be involved? Invite each other. You never know. They might show up. We had at least over 5 police officers there in their uniform. We had, politicians there. It was a wonderful, great event with the youth and with the adults. And we all connected and we had a great time at the Cinema Arts Center. So I say that to say, you know, that if we can create initiatives for mental illness individuals and for the youth and for our residents and anything that we do create, we should be able to create it with the police officers. Thank you.
Thank you, Kimberly. Our next speaker is Sam Law.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me?
We can.
Awesome. So first I want to say I'm with the stakeholder group. My organization, Young Hip Professionals, was asked to be a part of it, and we are grateful to be a part of it. Thank you very much. I'm also with LI United again in transforming policing and community. My major concern is with what the actual police force looks like. I do not see enough representation of Black and brown people. I've been working with the town the town of Riverhead, the town supervisor, town councilwoman Jody Giglio, as well as the chief of police, to increase diversity and inclusion on the police force out there. That's a village police force. But it is really highly disturbing to me that out of, I believe the number is 2,600 police officers in Suffolk County, that only 50 something are people of color or Black, you know, and there is a certain quota for Latinos, for Spanish speaking officers, but we still need more of them, especially in communities like Brentwood, Bayshore, Wyandanch, where I'm from, or where I reside now, you know. And I think we need to start making sure that our officers are in all schools, having these building these community relationships, letting children see officers of color, officers that are Caucasian as well, so that they have a desire to become police officers. You can become a police officer in Suffolk County at 19 years old. But how are you going to recruit Black and brown people if they don't have relationships starting as youth? So I think that that is one major change that needs to take place. And we need to start the recruiting process, not a year, not 8 months prior to the test. It needs to go on now. We need to be actively recruiting right now, even if it's on a smaller scale. Another issue that I have is with the training method. You know, I did participate in the civilian program, and some of the training methodology, it needs to change, and it needs to become more conducive to understanding Black and brown people and how they may respond to issues. I mean, sometimes, you know, we have a different response that people not like us, not in our culture, might not understand, and they think of us as being a threat. That's a training issue, you know. And I would really like to see change in those areas. Civil service is a pathway to wealth for people of color, for all people, but especially people of color. And I've noticed that Caucasians have made it a legacy building thing to be a part of the police force, and we need to start working on that now for people that look like me. And that's all I have to say for today's meeting. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sam. The next person that we will call on is Mariah. Last name Prensa.
Hello.
Hello.
Thank you for allowing me to speak again today. The first thing that I want to address is a topic that Speaker 7 brought up, which is in regards to the Finn Institute. I recommend that everyone on this call look up the Finn Institute. They play a very important role in this county. They have a contract to analyze the traffic stop data, and they also have a contract to complete a community survey. And if you look at their website, it is very clear that they have a bias in favor of the status quo and a bias in favor of law enforcement. And it's actually made up and supported by a lot of law enforcement institutions. And they have their own, how should I say, they have their own prerogative with law enforcement. They have their own thing going, their own purpose, aside from assisting Suffolk County. So I share the same concern that the Finn Institute is in charge of looking at such an important question, which is bias in police stops. So I also encourage the task force to take a look at those contracts. And something also as important as a community survey that is intended to, as a result of the DOJ agreement, to allow for the county and for the police department to get a sense of, or to just to get feedback from people of color, specifically Latino and Black and African Americans in this county, to get feedback from them and their experiences with law enforcement. I think it's very troublesome to leave that very big and important task to an institution that is obviously biased from my perspective when I look at their website. So I encourage everyone to look at the website to see what you think when you do research on the Finn Institute, and especially when there are other options like Stony Brook University, who can do this research, or some other suggestions that were brought up by speaker number 7. I also want to talk about, Shaniqua brought up the incident with the young man, or the young men that were stopped and were assaulted by the police. And, you know, those individuals were brave enough to come forward about what happened to them. Many people are not brave enough, or, you know, are just afraid to come forward with their negative experiences with the police department. So those young men were brave enough, and their families were brave enough to come forward. And Shaniqua did a good job at doing some outreach. And as a result of that, I attended, and many other people attended, many precinct meetings after that. And those precinct meetings, I believe they were at the 5th precinct. Oh no, the 3rd precinct. I think they were the 3rd precinct. They were packed with community members concerned about the situation. So it just concerns me that these people were brave enough to come forward. The community were there to support them. I'm telling you, the room was packed, where many times I went there and I had to stand up in the back, and many people had to stand up in the back. And still they got no justice. So that is very concerning. So I hear when people say, you know, we need to invite each other to events and create those relationships. But how can I want to go to an event and create those relationships when I know that if my brother or my cousin or a client of mine were to get beat up by a police officer, assaulted and called the N-word, that no justice will be brought to them? So what does it matter that you invite me to an event, or that I invite you to an event, if at the end of the day no justice will be done if something like that were to happen? So I also support what Shaniqua said. The other thing that I want to speak about, which a couple of people spoke about, was transparency. And on the website for this task force, there's some data on the school resource officers. And it shows the arrest of youth, of children. I would call them children, but on here they're described as people under the age of 18. It shows in 2013, 1,346 children were arrested. In 2019, 1,249 children were arrested, but there is no breakdown on their race or ethnicity. So I think I would recommend to this task force to provide that data. And whenever you're providing this kind of data, it's important to include demographics, so we have a good understanding of what the biases are, and if there are any biases. So those are my recommendations.
Mariah, question for you. You just provided statistics. Please clarify those statistics that you just provided.
So on the website for this task force, there's a tab for resources. On that list of resources, there's a section for SROs. When you click on that, a PDF document pops up. And the title of the document is the School Resource Officer Program. There's a short paragraph about SROs, where they're located.
Yep, I know what you're referring to, yes.
Then there's another chart that says School Resource Officer Statistics.
Yes.
And it says the arrest of SROs for 2018, 2019, and 2020. And then it says Suffolk County PD arrests for 18-year-olds and under, where it says 1,346 in 2018, 1,249 2019, but there is no breakdown of race or ethnicity or age for that data. So we're here to talk about, you know, these biases, but the data that's presented to us doesn't give us enough information to determine whether there's a bias in that. You know, there was
the reason why I asked you that question is because I thought you first said that those were arrests by SRO officers. So that was the reason I asked for the clarification.
No, well, the arrests by SRO officers were.
No, yep, I'm familiar. I wanted to clarify that you did not mean that those were arrests by SROs.
They aren't, no, the data doesn't show that they're arrested by SRO, but we know that SROs share information with the police department. So, I mean, I don't know what the distinction is. So if a SRO gives the information to Suffolk County, they're a member of Suffolk County PD and employed by Suffolk County PD. So if a SRO gives information to the police department, who's to say that, you know, that arrest that was made by Suffolk County PD isn't associated with the SRO that's in their school? But that's a different question.
Okay.
I would just appreciate it
Thank
if we were able to get stats and really understand what was the race breakdown of these children that were arrested, to see if there were biases, which I suspect that maybe there are biases in that, but it would be good to know.
Thank you for clarifying.
No problem.
And thank you for your comment. Lynn Kaufman.
Yep, hi. First of all, I just need to say something. Speaker number 6 was talking about police and in a traffic stop. I'm on the traffic committee with Terrell, with Long Island United, and we're doing a ton of research. I never thought I'd know so much about traffic at my age and interactions with police. It is statistically insignificant in this entire country the number of times a police person is shot while making a traffic stop. It just simply doesn't happen. It happens on Law and Order, and it happens in the movies, but it doesn't really happen in real life. The biggest danger police have in a traffic stop is that when they get out of their car, a motorist will hit them as they're walking to the other car. But we really need to get over this notion that when police go to the window of a car, someone pulls a gun and kills them, and therefore they need a gun to protect themselves, because it is statistically insignificant the amount of times that it happens. So I was going to talk about traffic, and then speaker number 8 spoke. Speaker number 8, who is a teacher at Bayshore High School, I think he said, and he teaches African American studies. And when he started to speak, he said, and recently he just finished his unit on police brutality. And every single person on this Zoom call just sat there. There's actually a unit in high school on police brutality. And not one of us said, hold on a minute. Are you kidding? There's what? There's a unit on police that's so common that we have a unit on police brutality. And that is what I came away from this meeting with. I'm a 65-year-old white woman. I can't relate to a single thing a person of color on this Zoom call has said tonight. And the sad fact is, people like me, affluent white people, are gonna make all the decisions on what we do, because we're always the people in charge. We can't relate to it. It's not going to affect our children. Now, I'm old enough that I have a son who's married to a Latina woman, and my daughter is soon to be married to an African American man. And their experiences with the police are so different than mine that it's like we live in 2 different countries. I know this because they're part of my family now. But the fact that every one of us could just sit here when a teacher said that he had to teach his students, a unit on police brutality, and no one was fazed? Yeah, police brutality. Well, shame on each and every one of us. And if something doesn't change soon, one day, just maybe, it's going to start to affect the white people, and then it'll be changed. There's never going to be, ever, a unit on police brutality in a European studies class. We're never having that. And that's really all I have to say. But thank you so much for having this. Really, it was a privilege to sit and get a little bit of a window into what people have to go through, which should never be gone through. So thank you.
Thank you, Lynn. A task force member of ours has a clarifying question or statement. Linda?
Len, I just wanted, I did react to it, but I do know Dr. Johnson, and Dr. Johnson has done work with me in the Human Rights Commission. And he has a wealth of knowledge as it relates to African American history or African diaspora and what has happened in this country with the African American community. And he is an amazing person who has so much to offer and has done presentations with me and has left people in the same state that you're in, totally blown away from his knowledge and what he brings to the table. And I just want you to know that it didn't go without notice, but understand that he's also teaching African American history and not your standard history class where you would only hear about European history or white American history as opposed to Black and brown information. So he's truly a gift. So thank you.
Thank you, Linda. We have another task force member with clarifying question or statement. Sharon?
Yes, I also wanted to say, Lynn, I have had experience with these things as a criminal defense attorney and a Black woman for over 27 years. So the fact that I didn't, react and appall is because I know this. It's sad. And I listened to all these stories today and it's very disheartening. But the thing that makes me feel like hopeful is that we are actually talking about it and doing something about it. And I think this is the moment. But thank you for your comments.
Thank you, Sharon. We're going to go back. We had one more speaker. I'm sorry, two. Kevin Thorburn, are you on now? Kevin? Okay, and then the last speaker that has raised their hand, he's spoken before, but he wanted to take the opportunity to speak one more time. So Terrell, we turn it over to you. You look surprised.
Yeah, I wasn't trying to speak
again. Okay, sorry.
I was thinking that Lynn, who has my name, said she
okay.
So I
confusing. Okay, we wanted to ensure if you had to speak again, wanted the opportunity to speak again, you could. Thank you, Terrell. Kevin, I think Kevin is trying to speak. Someone is saying that we just can't hear him. If we can find his, okay, Kevin, we see you. We can't hear you though. We're gonna give him a minute. Okay, Kevin is having some technical difficulties. So we do have another opportunity for the next 6 sessions where if Kevin wants to make that statement or comment, or Kevin, feel free to provide that to us at public.info@suffolkcountyn.gov. So this concludes the public portion, input and listening session portion of our task force meeting this evening. Before I conclude and give you concluding remarks, I'd like to turn it over to our Police Commissioner, Jerry Hart. And then after Police Commissioner Jerry Hart, it will be Deputy Police Commissioner Risco Menchin-Lewis.
One second, please. Vanessa, I have Kevin on my phone.
Okay.
I called him on my phone. If he speaks quickly, it won't die.
Okay.
So I hope you all can hear him. Go ahead, Kevin.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, Kevin.
Okay, great. So I just wanted to, I listened the whole time, and it's obviously that we have a lot of issues, and we have a lot of great speakers on this call, a lot of good comments. I really liked what June said about the social workers being involved, and some of, so that way when the police get the call, there's and there's issues with some mental health issues that the police officers call social workers to maybe come in and help out, which I'm I'm almost positive they have a unit that comes in, but to add to that, there should be local social workers involved in that. And also on the 911 call, maybe the operator should, if they don't, maybe ask. A lot of times it's a family member calling about another family member that has mental issues, or so that should be one of the questions asked by the operator if they don't do that. The other thing I want to talk about is what Kim Edwards said, who is a pillar in our community. And what she said about doing different events, they work. And it's important that we stay involved in these different events. And when she means events, it's not just a lot of the sporting events or the music events. It's also the events, the school events, like the school board meetings. I go to a lot of school board meetings, not just at Huntington, where I'm a resident of Huntington Station. I go to a lot of other ones. I don't see any, maybe a handful of people that look like me. And that's a problem. The town board meetings, I see a handful. I can count on one hand how many people look like me at the town board meetings. That's a problem, you know. And so these things need to be addressed. Yes, there's a larger issue that we have to address with our police departments, and we have to address those issues. But we also have to address these issues also. And the other thing I just want to say is that, you know, I've been going to a lot of meetings for over 20 years and watching how, especially some of the meetings that include the police officers. So a lot of the meetings that include the police officers, there's a lot of the police officers that are good that we never see, you know, or hear about the complaints about. There's always the officers that are there. So we need to see, and I know this probably can't happen, I mentioned it before, some of the officers that are being written up need to be at some of these meetings to see the people and hear what they have to say, because that's important. But I do want to say, throughout this whole conversation, I think Kim was the only one that maybe said something positive about some of the officers, because there are a lot of great officers. You know, I'm 100% pro-police, but I'm 100% against police brutality. You know, so, but I do have to say there are a lot of good police officers out there. And the last thing to say, part of that was what happened today. A young man who has some mental issues, and this could have went in the wrong direction. He was pulled over, and this young man called me. I was 7 minutes away, and he said he got pulled over with his girlfriend. And I know his state of mind, so I rushed over. And as I rushed over to get there, I made a U-turn. So the police officers told me to make a U-turn. And I pulled behind the officers, and the officers got in the car when they saw me get out, and he approached me, and he said, how can we help you? And I said, I don't want to interrupt, you know, you're pulling over this young man, but I would like to know why you're pulling him over. And he explained to me. And the young man was in the, him and his girlfriend was in the, absolutely was wrong, completely wrong. And I don't want to go in details, but they were completely wrong. This young man, because he had these mental issues, he was going back at the police officer. So when I got there, I asked him to calm down. And then I spoke to the officer, I pulled officer son, I spoke to him, and I explained to him that at this time right now, if they can please just take in consideration that everything that's going on in our community and our nation, if they can just let them park the car, whatever issues they had, we can resolve it later, but just let them park the car and leave the car. And the officers went and explained to me everything that was wrong with that car, but the officers still took in consideration that they didn't want this issue to escalate. And it was, and like I said, I'm always fighting against police brutality. So when something good happens with officers, I also have to fight. If I'm gonna fight for one thing, I have to fight for everything. And these two young officers, Officer Ryan Baranick and Officer Dylan Ross, they took that in consideration, and they let this young lady and this young man go, but leave their car there. and told them don't drive the car until they get everything worked on. But it was that was a teaching moment for me, for them, and for this young man who, in the past, has had violent situations with police officers, and this incident changed his mindset a little bit, you know, because these officers took that opportunity to say, okay, let's make this a teaching moment. I can arrest you and everything can happen, but listen, let's try to do it this way. And let's work on it, and which is a great. It was a great situation. So there are some really good police officers that we have to have on these calls sometime to speak about it, and that might help with encourage some of the bad officers, which is going to be difficult, you know, because there's a lot of officers that are set in their ways, and hopefully some of the training will help. But it's important that we try to encourage and get some of the great officers to help with promoting these bad officers to see that they're doing wrong in our communities, instead of just turning their heads to it. But like I said again, these activities and these events, Officer Delgado does a lot of this in our community. These events work. These activities work. So let's continue doing it. Let's continue supporting them because they all work. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Kev.
Thank you, Kevin. And just so that you know, you may not have heard it on the phone, but in the chat, there have been a couple of messages as well of people speaking about officers that they've worked with, been very collaborative with, and have seen change in their communities. So you might not have heard it vocalized, but it is in the chat as well. So I just wanted to underscore that. Before I conclude, I turn it over to Police Commissioner Jerry Hart and then to Deputy Police Commissioner Risco Menchin-Lewis.
Thank you, and thank you to everybody. I mean, this is a very powerful forum. We're hearing a lot of different stories, different thoughts. Really, Kevin really summed it up. I mean, that's what community policing is. It's not about carnivals and fairs. It's about relationships. It's about identifying problems and solving them together. And that's what we're committed to here. So I am a huge fan of it. I'm a huge believer in it. I think it's very successful. And we're going to continue to move in that direction as a department. Just listening to all of you, there's, some common thoughts that ran throughout. We talked about a lot about mental health and how to deal with individuals who are struggling. That is certainly a concern in policing throughout the nation. And this is a tremendous opportunity to really address it head on. So we're, aware of that. We know that when that comes to our doorstep, there has been a massive failure in the system because the police department should not be the ones who are left to deal with that situation. But the fact remains that we are the people that are dealing with that and answering the phone and responding. So again, a tremendous opportunity to deal with this. I would love to follow up with Speaker 8, who's a teacher, and if there's an opportunity for me to meet with the students, I would love that opportunity. These are just conversations that are important to have, and a lot of you brought up the fact that they need to be addressed at a young age, not just simply in high school. I think there was the speaker from the new school who talked about his relationship with the police officer in high school, and maybe that it was advantageous to do that earlier. So I would just put that out as an invitation. And I'm always happy to hear more details. We can meet one-on-one or, chat on Zoom in the age of COVID, but there's some tremendous ideas out there. There's a lot of passion. And this is the opportunity. This is when we have to get at the deep, deep issues. And it's not easy. It's certainly not easy, but this is a great step, and we are committed to making those big changes. So thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Commissioner. Deputy Police Commissioner?
Yes, thank you all for being on the call. It has been extremely informative. It's kind of funny, Commissioner Hart and I were in the office late before we had to come get to our houses to get on these calls. And really the last conversation was about reimagining policing and mental health. It was the last conversation Commissioner Hart brought up, and all the different ways we need to think about it. So it's kind of exciting for me, and I'm sure for Commissioner Hart, to have such a robust dialogue. It was almost like foreshadowing, or I don't know what you call it, but anyways, it was just good to see so many people talking about mental health and having the resources that you've done the research because that's phenomenal. I mean, that's what we're looking for. We're looking for partnerships that can enlighten us so that we can really reimagine as a department, and also as this committee goes forward, reach out to all of U.S. resources. The next thing I wanted to say is, you know, I worked hard in terms of looking for Finn, and so I know people have reservations about their website, but this is the bottom line. Finn didn't come out with any different findings than Newsday. So for all what we think about them, their findings were the same. And so the next phase we're looking at is what will be the solutions? And we are looking throughout the nation. Every day this week, we've been on a call with somebody from across the nation on traffic stop data. Every expert in the country. The first conversation we had was with Phil Goff's Police and Equity. That was the first conversation we had. And then we spoke to Robin Engel, and we spoke to, you know, Laura Fidel, and we spoke to, can't tell you the number of people we've spoken to. So we're on it, we are, and we look forward to listening to the findings and the thoughts and the research of the Long Island Police and Equity. Actually, I don't know the name. Long Island
Unified.
Yeah, Long Island United to transform policing, because they're doing that research. And so just know that we're open to the input because we're doing the research, but you're doing research too, and it's going to be a community solution. And the last thing I think I want to say is, you know, as an African American woman, one woman spoke about, you know, kind of rich white people are going to make the decisions. That's not true in this one. And you may have been true about a lot of one, but not this one. We're all going to make this dialogue. I'm at the table. I'm a deputy police commissioner. I'm doing the research. Commissioner Hart is dedicated to this. The department is dedicated to this. And I'm not saying it's hard to hear. It's hard to be looked at. For some officers, I think people are saying, looking at us, the department is racist. I think that's a very hurtful thing to hear. But I'm hoping all of you on this call will know that we're doing the work. We're doing the research, you're doing the research, and together we're going to come up solutions, and that we will be, I assure you, we will be one of the leaders in the nation when it comes to this, because of the way we're doing this, because of the way we're listening, and because of the intellect and the research all of you have done that will input into the process. So we all thank you, and I've thoroughly enjoyed listening to all of you.
Thank you, Deputy Police Commissioner. As your co-facilitators, myself and John Kamen, and the task force members, we have all been engaged in research, looking at best practices, what models work throughout the country, not trying to recreate anything, because in certain instances, there may be opportunities where you need to create something from its infancy. But there are models out there that we can definitely extrapolate from and use for implementation within Suffolk County. And that is the work that we have been engaged in as staffers to the task force. That is the work that the police department is engaged in. That is the work that your task force members are engaged in looking at models throughout the country that can possibly be implemented and to help to develop the strategies that we produce and implement within Suffolk County. So I'm thankful to the task force members for all of the research, all of the ideas, all of the recommendations that they've come up with thus far. Thankful to everyone that is on this call that spent, you know, almost north of 3 hours engaged in this conversation and sharing suggestions, recommendations, stories. And sometimes those stories are not easy stories to tell. Sometimes the topics are not easy topics to talk about, but you've taken the courage to stand and to have this conversation. And you know, while I look at the comments in the chat, I just want people to be respectful of the opportunity for someone to voice their opinion. You may not agree with that opinion, but be respectful of the opportunity for someone to voice that opinion, because we all can learn from each other. No one is an expert in everything, but we are experts in respecting each other so that we can get to a point, a common ground, and a consensus as to what needs to be implemented within Suffolk County to ensure fair, just, and equitable policing in Suffolk County. The county executive is briefed on all of these interactions, these public listening sessions that we have. Our task force members our task force meetings, the subject areas that we're talking about, and we engage, myself and John Kamen, as well as the other staff, engage in conversations with our county executive as we are engaged in this work of police reinvention and reform. John, I turn it over to you before I close.
No, I just want to say it was a great meeting. A lot of good people doing important work. And again, thanks to Vanessa and Deputy County Executive Vanessa Bastreter for doing such a great job just moderating this today, and the staff that are doing really important work as well. So to our police, to our task force members, and as Vanessa said, the County Executive's Office and the County Executive, we're all engaged. And thank you to those who participated tonight. You're making this worthwhile for us, and our county, our community will benefit from everyone's participation. So thank you.
Thank you. So I just have some closing housekeeping that we'd like to share with you. So Portia, if you could share the next page, please, just the screen. So as we indicated on this call, and if there's anything that you want to share with the task force, some of the research that you talked about, we already have. Much of the research that you talked about, we do not have. So take the opportunity to share this information with us. Please email it to public.input@suffolkcountiny.gov. You also can visit our task force website. Mariah in particular referenced some of the data that we have available on our website. All you have to do is just Google Suffolk County Government, and you'll look at the top yellow bar of our page, and it says police reform. You click that icon and it will take you to the page. And if there are resources that you're looking for and you don't see on there, please feel free to email us and ask us. Next tab, please. So we have 6 more meetings that are going to be taking place within Suffolk County. Our next meeting is next Wednesday, November 11th. It's focused on the 3rd precinct, the town of Islip, but realize that you are not required just to join the particular area or the precinct or the community in which you reside. So please feel free. And I think someone on the call mentioned that the meetings are not well attended. Today we had 130 people that were on the call with 30 speakers. And if you have the opportunity to share this information, it is incumbent upon each and every person that was on this call to ensure that they're sharing the information with their constituencies to ensure that people have a voice and can be heard and provide their recommendations and suggestions. So the upcoming listening sessions are here. If you go to our task force page, you actually can print out and download the JPEG of our task force public listening sessions, as well as the next document. Portia, you can go to the next document. As well as the upcoming community meetings that happen on a precinct level. So both of those documents are there in English and in Spanish. You have the opportunity, while this was a listening session and an opportunity for you to voice and to be listened to, your police community meetings have an opportunity for you to engage in dialogue, particularly with those that are officers that are policing in your community and in your neighborhoods. So we encourage people to participate not only in our listening sessions, but to participate in the Suffolk County precinct community meetings. The next dates of the community meetings are listed here. They're also listed on our task force page. They're also listed on the Suffolk County Police website. So we ask you just to remain as informed and serve as ambassadors to this process so that we can ensure that everyone is participatory in the process. Once again, we thank all of you for dedicating your time, your talent, and your treasure this evening as we dialogued about police reform and reinvention. If there's anything that you'd like us to follow up with, or you'd like to follow up with us on anything, please take the opportunity to email us or to reach out to us. But I thank all of you for your time and commitment. And we look forward to our next public listening session, which is going to be on November 11th. Hopefully we'll see some of you. If we don't, we want you to share that information with your neighbors and your friends to ensure that they can be part of our process. We thank all of you. Have a blessed evening and take care.